Good morning. Good morning. Okay, it is unheard of to have this much fun before cocktail o'clock. So Creative Mornings must be the best kept secret in Columbus, because how had I never heard about this place till Karen, where's Karen, asked me. There's Karen, thanks so much for speaking my name in rooms that I'm not in. Till Karen shot me that email asking whether I would do this, and then I had an opportunity to connect with Brandy, and I'm just realizing, where's the clicker? Am I supposed to get that from you, or did I miss it? It's right here. No, you're fine. So thank you all so much for having me. Before I jump in, let me just ask a quick question. I always kind of like to level set. How many of you have ever moved to a new city? Hands up if you've ever moved to a new city. Okay, all right, great. So I'm in good company. Picture this, right? 2018, as was said, I moved to a new community. Now, I'd moved several times before, because you've heard Brandy talk about it. This was like, I'd moved 7 times before that. This was my 8th move. But what was pretty different about this move is I was moving and making a decision not just for myself, but for my family, right? This particular move felt weighty in the fact that I had to, as the cool kids would say, make decisions fully in my parenting era, you know? I had to think about things like schools. Well, what schools would they go to? You know, you kind of grade good schools, right? Community feel, like what is that? You know, I loved older homes, right? So it's like I needed a community with some, you know. I need to be able to do plumbing work. I don't know, like a pipe needs to bust every once in a while, right? I needed older homes. And so through that thoughtful kind of, or what I thought was very thoughtful decision making, I ended up in this community that everyone knows is Upper Arlington. This was my community of choice. This was home. I mean, look at us, looking like we're doing an ad for U-Haul, right? Like, we were committed. I was in. This is home. My daughter was just about to start kindergarten, and so this is where I was going to raise them. And everything was lovely and fine and dandy for just about a month. Because a month in, my daughter, Aubrey, has started kindergarten. She's a month into class. And she comes home, and she says to me, "Mom, can you straighten my hair for school tomorrow?" Now, she's 5 years old. For some people, this may not be an odd question. For my family, this was a particularly odd question. Why? Because we don't straighten our hair. Up until that point, she'd only straightened her hair once, and that was for my sister's wedding, so it's a very special occasion kind of thing. And so it was one of those questions that caused me pause, but also caused me to probe. Like, why would she want to straighten her hair? In that process of probing, I realized that in her 5-year-old mind, you know, we're adults, we can probably contextualize things differently, but in her 5-year-old mind, that to her felt like, if I do that, I'll belong. I'll belong in the community. And as someone that has put so much thought into moving in the community, I'm committed. Listen, I got a photographer. We did the thing, right? This is home. We sent home announcements, you know, with new address, done all the things. As someone who had made a commitment to call this home, friends, I was at a crossroads. Now, crossroads, figuratively speaking, because Webster Dictionary defines crossroads as a crucial point where a decision must be made. I want to emphasize that word must for a second, right? Now, in Ukeme's definition, that means a forced decision. You know you're at a crossroads in life when you're forced to make a decision. So I'm standing at a decision point. Do I stay in this community that I am now calling home, or do I make somewhere else home? Now, I'll digress for a minute because I remember when I spoke and I had this picture up. A delightful older black lady came up to me after the speech and she was like, "Now, baby, Doing hair is not one of your gifts. And I said, ma'am, you are right. That's why my hair is short now. That's why my hair is short now, because I decided I only want to do one person's hair in the morning, okay? So let me say this and say, today we listen, we don't judge, all right? We're going to go on that trend. We listen, we don't judge. So I was at a crossroad. And I've navigated many crossroads. I'm in the middle of one right now. And in reflecting on crossroads, I think we spin out too much about, are we going to make the right decision? Right? If it's forcing a decision, it's either left or it's right. It's forward or it's back, right? You got to move, and we get so spun out about making the right decision, when it's less about that and more about the courage to face whatever is next. But courage is not just something that's bestowed on us, right? Courage is something that we come into. How do we do that? In my experience, at this particular crossroad, because whatever decision I made wasn't just going to impact me, it was going to impact my family. I realized two things, and those are the two things I want to talk about today. That when you're in a crossroad, to navigate that crossroad, there's two things that we have to do. Center that crossroad on curiosity. How am I here? Why am I here? Center curiosity and build coalitions. I'll take each of these in turn. This thing about centering curiosity, what I really mean is that you're seeking to understand how, not why. I want to emphasize that because when we are conditioned to ask why things are the way they are. Have you ever asked an 8-year-old why? What did they say? Because. All right? I just dealt with that this morning. So why creates a defensiveness, but it also creates a flat answer. If I asked, why is my daughter the only black girl in her kindergarten class, and there are 3 sections? Because Aubrey wanted to straighten her hair because that's what she thought would create belonging. If the question I started asking is, why is she the only black kid? Or why is she not going to see her first black teacher till the 8th grade? And I tried, I started there, but I had to change that question to how it became that way. When I started with why, the question was, because that's the population of people that live here. Why is she the only black girl? Because that's the population of people, well, that's factual. But when I started to flip that question to, how did she become the only black girl in the kindergarten class? Well, that opened up the conversation. It opened up the conversation to understanding what I didn't know, that Upper Arlington was a red-lined community, right? How come she's not going to see her first black teacher till the 8th grade? Well, that opens up the question to focus on more things like recruiting, not because that's just the teachers that we get that want to work here. And so when you start to seek to understand how things have become, how did I get to this point? How did I get to this crossroad? You will begin to uncover a very, very rich conversation. One that you, because you're the person asking the questions, starts to draw the patterns. Because you have all these inputs. And when you start to draw those patterns, you also start to build trust, because as you start to echo back what you've heard to people for verification. So, for instance, when we talked about, well, why is the population of UA the population it is? And it's like, well, how did we get there? And you start to learn, well, it wasn't always that way. We did have this gentleman, Pleasant Litchford, right, that had bought all this land, but then it was taken. It leads to richer conversations that then allows people to start to say, how do we solve the problem with you? Not for you, but with you. Along the way, you'll start to build coalitions. And those coalitions will do two things for you. They will bridge your differences in perspective and in approach. Running for council was never my idea, wasn't in my purview. I have immigrant parents that the only thing that you do is go to work, put your head down, pay your taxes, be a good kid, right? Running for office seems so rebellious. You're out there. I actually remember when I told my parents, I think I'm going to run for office. And they're like, are they going to want to know more about your mom and your dad? Because we're out. Like, we don't want anything to do with this, right? But running for council would never have been my approach. I say that because as we started to build coalition, that was an approach that was presented to me. And, funny enough, my perspective of it is, well, you all have seen me show up in the schools. I've started to ask how more in the schools. How are we getting the books that we read? How are we recruiting for teachers? Don't you think it makes sense for me to run for school board instead? That's where everyone sees my voice. And the perspective of some of those coalitions that were built that would jump into the fray to help run my campaign was, Ukeme, people choose UA for the schools, just like you said you chose UA for the schools. But how do you make people choose community? And then the schools just the benefit. Because people that choose UA for the schools are already bought in. What you're trying to do is get new people to buy in. And that work doesn't happen on school board. That work happens on council. That work happens because you're thinking about things like housing. That work happens because you're thinking about how are we better neighbors. We're a landlocked, fully developed community, which means we're around other communities. But how are we partnering with other communities? That work happens because we're asking, how are we spending the city's money? How are we doing economic development? Is that money accessible to just people that know how to bid for our contracts? Or can we think about a different way of procurement in the city? Think about that. A shift in perspective that would never have been mine. And a shift in approach that would never have been mine. Simply because we were able to build those coalitions. And so when I ran for office, my campaign team looked nothing like me. And to the outside, it actually made no sense. I had a teacher, because guess what? The first person that had answered a lot of my how questions was this said teacher, right? I had a neighbor, because who brought the cookies when I was standing out there with Soul and we're taking the pictures? Said neighbor. And so she knew how much I'd invested and how much I had chosen this community, right? And then had a good marketer, because who doesn't need good marketing? And someone that was able to allow me be authentic, because what would they say? It's like, oh, Ukeme, the campaign colors are red, blue, and purple, because purple is red and blue. Those are your colors. And I'm like, no, but I like orange, and have you ever seen my wardrobe? And I like teal. And so I needed the marketer that said, okay, we can make that work because that is authentically you, and that's who we know. Now, when you're bridging perspectives and approach, it gets difficult. Because you, in your way of your bias, like I'm also rooted in my own set of biases, thinks, I have to do it this way. But if you're truly going to build good coalitions, it's going to be a meeting in the middle. And that only happens because you've done the first part of the work. You've asked the how. You've built the trust. So what does impact feel like? When you've decided what direction to go on that crossroad. It doesn't matter what side of the crossroad you take, no one's going to be standing there applauding. No one's going to be saying you did the right thing. You know what's going to be saying you did the right thing here, what you feel. But every once in a while, someone comes along, and this photo came 3 years after I'd been in office, where a mom sent a photo of her daughter, who's was my daughter's age at the time when I started the work. My daughter is now 12 years old. And this girl, as you can see, is a little black girl, and she's in City Hall, and she's walking by the hallway that has the wall of mayors. And she stops, and she looks at my photo on that wall. And her mom takes this picture and sends this picture to me. Because by now, you guys have figured what road I took. I stayed. I doubled down in the community. Some people have always thought, goodness, that's insane. How are you going to overcome this? The population of black people in UA is still 1.7%. But we talk about percentages. There's 37,000 residents in UA. For my math geeks in here, 1.7 is still 40 to 60 people. So are we going to say those 40 to 60 households don't matter? For me, in getting this picture with that one black girl stopping and looking and saying to her mom, "We know her." Not because she literally knows me, but because she's seen me in the community. And her mom sends me that picture with a note that says, "Thank you. I have also stayed because of you." So that's what impact feels like. And for those of you navigating Crossroads right now, I'm also using this formula as I navigate a career pivot myself. I'm asking questions. I'm seeking to understand how. And then some of you call it networking, I call it building coalitions. And you're building those coalitions for two purposes, like I said, to bridge your differences in perspectives and an approach, because the approach may surprise you. So I'm going to end there. Friends, see you at the crossroad. You got this. Thank you so much.